What's going on YouTube? Jeremy Gray here. Did you ever think, what is the best lens or the one lens that you need? If you could just take one lens with you all around the world or to a shoot, what would that lens be? Well, in today's video, I want to cover just that topic. I want to talk about my favorite all-around lens. The lens, if I could only bring one lens, it would be this lens. It's the lens that this video is currently being shot on. I love this lens to death, so let's get right into it. Alright, so you obviously want to know what lens I'm talking about, so I'm just going to spoil it right away, and I'm so sorry for the basic answer. The lens in question is the 35mm lens, a 1.8 typically, because that is going to be the cheaper alternative and the smaller one. So today I just really want to dig into why a 35mm is the best lens across the board if you can only have one lens with you. So the 35mm focal length is a very, very classic focal length. It is very close to what our eyes naturally see, so it's going to be a very familiar field of view. It's going to help things look a lot more natural and neutral. It's going to be very nice for photos and for videos. In this video right now, I'm going to be addressing both photo and video. It's not going to be specific to either end of the spectrum because this lens performs excellently across both ends. Because it's so close to what we naturally see, it's going to make the viewer kind of feel like they're there with you or they're in the shot because it's just how the eyes see. When you start going more telephoto, say like 85mm, 105, it's a lot more compressed and we can't see that naturally. And on the opposite end, if you go super wide, like a 12, 14, or 16mm, it's just super wide. It doesn't look like that. It's all distorted. Everything's pushed back and pulled forward in the foreground. So this 35mm natural look is very, very appealing for photos and for video. So generally speaking, a 35mm lens, especially the 1.8s, are going to be very lightweight, cheap, and compact, and it's going to be very, very important for beginners, for anybody traveling that wants to travel light, and just to keep your kit smaller overall is always a nice thing. If you go with the 1.4 model over the 1.8, it's going to be bigger and heavier, and if you're trying to avoid that, I definitely recommend going for the 1.8. Don't get trapped in that mentality that you need a 1.4 lens, because you really, really don't. The lens I'm shooting with is the Nikon 35 1.8S for the Z-mount. It's a 1.8 lens and it is spectacular. It's one of the best lenses I've ever used. I've used a lot of lenses over the last 10 years. This is by far one of my absolute favorite lenses, and it's a 1.8. There's this whole thing on the internet where everyone thinks you need a 1.4 or 1.2, and it's just simply not true. So don't worry too much about getting that 1.4 because they are super, super expensive typically. And aside from price, the 1.8s are going to be smaller and lighter. They're going to fit in your bag easier. You're not going to get tired of carrying it all day. And for me personally, I am more apt to take photos or videos if it's convenient for me. So if I have a light, small kit, something I can use, just hold it on my shoulder and it's not going to bother me. When I'm shooting with it, it's not going to bother me. I'm a lot more apt to take photos. Whereas say when I'm shooting with a 70-200, I don't really want to whip that out too often, so I miss shots maybe, I don't even know. The 35 is just a nice size, it fits nicely in your hands, and it's just a pleasure to shoot with overall. Versatility of this lens is gigantic. From landscapes to portraiture, you can pretty much do anything. The lens is just wide enough that you can capture a lot of the landscape in the image. I'm not going to say it's the ideal lens for a landscape-specific photographer, but if you're traveling and you want to capture a vibe and the feel of where you are, this lens will get the job done. And for portraits, it's again not wide enough that it's going to distort your subject, but you could still get closer to your subject to produce a lot more bokeh and background blur. That was redundant, but and still get a beautiful, beautiful portrait out of it without distorting your subject if you're using something like a 16 or 24mm. 24mm is not terrible for portraits, but there's definitely some distortion there, whereas the 35, there's very minimal, if any. On that same note, if you get super, super close to your subject, 35 will definitely produce a little bit of distortion, but you'd have to be like really close, basically the minimum focusing distance of this lens. I love that with the 35, you can capture your subject and the environment behind them, so you could really get a feel of what's going on in the photo or in the video. There's a lot less compression than say an 85 or even a 50mm lens. The compression, or the less compression, is going to let you see more detail in the background without completely blowing it to smithereens with just this intense bokeh, but you still get a nice blur if you want it. If you want to shoot wide open and really blur out the background, you can. If you stop down to say 2.8 or 3.5, you're going to get some nice detail in the back, but there's still going to be separation from your subject. I hope that makes sense. If I was going on a trip and I can only bring one lens with me, like literally that was it, my only option, it would absolutely, without a doubt, be a 35mm lens. And this is both for photo and video. I would only use this lens if I had to, and I would make it work. Even if I had to make vlogs, it wouldn't be perfect, but it could get the job done. I do have a video on my channel showing that you can indeed vlog if you wanted to with a 35mm focal length. I'll link that video up here, although it's with the Canon M50 with the 22mm lens, but on that crop sensor camera, it's a field of view equivalent to a 35mm, so it's relevant. And you can see there that I did vlog all day with just the 35mm focal length. A bonus of only using this lens also while traveling would be that you really have to focus on your environment, on your composition, and what you're shooting, because you can't just zoom in and out and be lazy about it. So it'd be really nice to really compose your shots. So like I mentioned earlier, you could pretty much get any shot you need while traveling with a 35mm lens, but I do want to mention what that excludes, and it's pretty obvious in my opinion. Obviously super wide, which I don't think you need while traveling a super wide lens. I have a video comparing primes and zooms, and I compare my 16 to 35 to this 35. I explained there that I don't really use 16mm all that often. Aside from that, you can't get the telephoto shots. So for example, this lens wouldn't be great for sports or for wildlife photography, but general use, street photography, landscapes, portraiture, this is gonna get the job done. If you're a strict sports or wildlife photographer, this is not gonna be the lens for you. Low light capabilities. This is going to tie in heavily with the aperture of the lens, and 35mm lenses typically have wider apertures like a 1.8, 1.4, sometimes f2, which is still pretty wide. It's going to let a lot of light hit the sensor, give you a shallower depth of field if you need it, and be super useful when you're traveling. And if you're trying to shoot portraits at sunrise, sunset, take some stuff around the city at night if it's like well lit, the wide aperture and that low light performance is going to be super useful and versatile. This is going to go across the board for photo and video. It's going to be useful on both ends of the spectrum. On the photo end of things, it's going to produce really beautiful bokeh if you want to. If you open up that aperture to the widest setting, like 1.8, and get kind of close to your subject, you're going to blow out the background and it's going to look beautiful. If you move a little bit further back, then you can keep a lot more in focus in the background. There's still going to be nice separation. When it comes to video, I'm not saying that bokeh equals cinematic, but when you're shooting a subject like a person, a lot of times bokeh can definitely help add some cinematic vibes and cinematic feels, some moodiness to the shot, especially close up to somebody's face. If you're trying to shoot a really wide shot, then it might not be the best idea. And I'm not saying shoot everything wide open. I'm just saying that at the times that you would need it for the low light situations like sunrise, sunset, and nighttime, it's super useful to have that. It's gonna make your kit a lot more versatile. It's gonna allow you to catch a lot more things that you wouldn't be able to capture if you were using a lens that had an aperture of say like f4. The 1.8 is gonna come in handy. I'm not saying shoot everything there, like I said, but it's really nice when you actually get to utilize it. It looks beautiful. So that's why I think that the 35mm lens is the only lens that I would need for any kind of shoot or trip that I'm taking. It is such a versatile lens. Yes, you're missing out on that super telephoto, but for me, it's not a deal breaker if I had to only bring one lens. If you have any questions about this lens or anything else, drop a comment down below. If you like this video, drop a thumbs up. If you disliked it, drop a thumbs down. That's cool too. Subscribe for future content. Got a ton of stuff coming out, a lot of big plans. Comment tacos if you made it this far. And if you are curious about anything that I use to make my videos, like the 35mm lens, there's Amazon links down in the description. They're affiliate links. If you click them, they bring it to Amazon. If you buy anything, I get a small commission at no extra charge to you. It just helps the channel keep growing. And I think I have to tell you that every time. I'm not sure. Either way, thank you all so much for being here. I will see you all in the next one. Just get out there, shoot, stay inside, shoot. Whatever you need to do to stay creative and get those juices flowing, just do it. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Come on, children of the sun.